Did you ever get a phone call that changed everything you thought you knew about your own family? I'm talking about the kind of message that makes your whole world tilt sideways, where suddenly the people you trusted most become strangers wearing familiar faces. That's exactly what happened to me on a Tuesday morning in March, standing in my kitchen with my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Malcolm's voice came through my phone speaker, not realizing he'd but dialed me. "That old bat doesn't know when to die," he sneered at someone else. "And Lila? She's too stupid to handle her own money anyway. Once we get the house signed over, we're golden." My hand started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone right there on the linoleum floor. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer. For 87 years, I'd lived through depression, war, raising a child alone, and burying the love of my life. Nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for hearing my son-in-law plot against my only daughter like she was just an obstacle in his way. Please tell me something in the comments section. Where are you watching this story from? And take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because every day there's a real story that will shake your heart. I stood there frozen, my whole body numb except for the burning in my chest. The message kept playing because Malcolm hadn't noticed his mistake yet. He was still talking, his voice dripping with contempt I'd never heard before. "The old woman's farmhouse is worth at least $400,000. Lila doesn't even realize what she's sitting on. Her mother's too sentimental to sell, but once we convince her she's losing it, boom, we're in." Someone laughed in the background. A woman's voice. Not my daughter's. My knees went weak, and I had to grab the counter to stay upright. I played it again, hoping I'd heard wrong, that maybe my old ears were playing tricks. But no. Every cruel syllable was crystal clear. "Old bat. Too stupid." Those words kept echoing in my head like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. My daughter married this man 3 years ago. We'd welcomed him into our family, into our home, into our lives. And this whole time, he'd been planning to take everything. Let me tell you who I am, because you need to understand why this hit me so hard. My name is Evelyn Ross, and like I said, I'm 87 years old. Until that Tuesday morning, I genuinely thought I'd seen everything life could throw at a person. I grew up on this same farm in Ohio, married my husband Carl when I was 19, and we worked this land together for 43 years before cancer took him. When Lila was just 6 years old, Carl died and I raised her alone. I worked dawn to dusk, keeping the farm running, making sure she had everything she needed. We didn't have much money, but we had love and respect and honesty. Or at least I thought we did. I taught Lila to be strong, to be kind, to see the good in people. Maybe I taught her too well, because now she couldn't see the snake she'd married. People in town called me tough, and said I had grit. I never thought of it that way. I just did what needed doing, same as any mother would. Malcolm came into our lives 4 years ago at the church potluck. I remember it clear as yesterday. He showed up carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, wearing a crisp blue shirt, and that perfect smile that made everyone like him instantly. He was handsome in that clean-cut way, with neat brown hair and eyes that crinkled when he laughed. 42 years old, worked in commercial real estate, drove a nice car. He zeroed in on Lila immediately, and within 2 months they were inseparable. Everyone loved him. The church ladies called him a catch. Mr. Dell from next door said Lila was lucky. Even Pastor Jerome said Malcolm seemed like a good Christian man. But something bothered me from the start. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly. Maybe it was how he called me ma'am, in that particular tone, like the word itself was an insult wrapped in politeness. Or how his eyes would calculate everything when he thought nobody was watching. I kept my mouth shut though. What could I say? That I had a bad feeling? That wouldn't stop a wedding. So Lila married him, and I smiled and welcomed him into the family, ignoring that little voice in my head. 2 weeks after I got that voicemail, Malcolm and Lila came for their regular weekend visit. They pulled up Saturday morning in Malcolm's silver sedan, both of them smiling and waving like everything was normal. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I kept my face perfectly neutral. I'd had 2 weeks to think, to plan, to decide how to handle this. Lila hugged me at the door, her strawberry blonde hair smelling like the lavender shampoo she'd used since high school. "Hey, Mama. We brought bagels from that bakery you like." Malcolm followed, carrying a white paper bag, his smile just as perfect as always. "Morning, Evelyn. You're looking well." I watched him closely, searching for any sign of the cruelty I'd heard in that message. Nothing. He was all charm and helpfulness, asking about my garden, commenting on the nice weather. It was like listening to a recording of a human being, everything practiced and perfect. We sat at the kitchen table eating bagels, and the whole time I kept comparing their smiling faces to those venomous words. The tension made my shoulders ache, but I didn't let it show. I started testing the waters gently, playing a role I'd never played before. "Malcolm, honey, can you remind me again what you said about the property tax?" I asked, letting my voice sound a bit confused. His eyes sharpened immediately, like a hawk spotting movement in the grass. "I didn't mention property tax, Evelyn. Are you feeling all right?" There it was. That little flash of something calculating behind the concern. "Oh, didn't you?" I could have sworn. I waved my hand vaguely. My memory's getting fuzzy lately. Lila reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mama, you're fine. Everyone forgets little things." But Malcolm leaned forward slightly, and I saw interest flicker across his face. He was filing this away, this suggestion that I was losing my sharpness. Good. Let him think that. Let him believe I was just a confused old woman who wouldn't notice if documents got signed or numbers got changed. I'd spent 6 decades running a farm, managing books, negotiating with buyers. My mind was just as sharp as it had ever been. But he didn't need to know that yet. The next morning, after Malcolm left for a meeting, Lila and I sat on the back porch with our tea. The spring air was still cool, but the sun felt warm on my face. I'd been waiting for a moment alone with my daughter, hoping she might open up without him there. "How are things, sweetheart?" I asked carefully. "Really, how are things?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything's good, Mama. Malcolm's been so helpful with organizing our finances. You know I was never good with numbers." My stomach clenched. "Organizing how?" "Oh, you know. He set up accounts, consolidated things. He says it's more efficient if he handles it since he works in finance." Her voice had that defensive edge that told me she'd had this conversation before, probably with herself. "He's just better at it than me." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her what I'd heard, play that message right there. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because if Malcolm was as calculating as I suspected, he'd already prepared for that. He'd call me senile, say I'd misunderstood, twist everything around. I needed proof, real proof, before I could save my daughter. Monday morning, I drove into town to visit the First National Bank. Ruthie Patterson sat behind the loans desk, same as she had for 30 years. We'd gone to the same church since we were girls, served on committees together, and buried our husbands within a year of each other. If anyone would help me quietly, it was Ruthie. "Evelyn," she said warmly when I approached her desk. "What brings you in today?" I lowered my voice. "Ruthie, I need to ask you something delicate. About Lila's trust account." Her expression shifted immediately to professional concern. "You know I can't discuss customer accounts, even with family." "I understand. But Ruthie, I'm worried. Has anyone added their name to that account recently? New signatures, anything like that? She studied me for a long moment, then glanced around the bank. Come to my office. Behind closed doors, she pulled up records on her computer. What she showed me made my blood run cold. Malcolm's name had been added to Lila's trust account 6 months ago. The same trust her father and I had set up years ago, meant to give her security if anything happened to me. These signatures, Ruthie said quietly, pointing at the screen. I processed them myself, but Evelyn, they looked odd. I almost flagged them. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with legal papers spread out in front of me. Papers I'd kept locked in Carl's old desk for years. Property deeds, the farm title, my will, Lila's trust documents. Everything we'd built, everything we'd protected. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Tom Whitner answered on the third ring. Evelyn Ross, as I live and breathe. To what do I owe this pleasure? Tom had been Carl's attorney and friend, the man who'd helped us set up everything after Carl got sick. He'd officially retired at 75, but still kept his law license active. Tom, I need help. Real help. I explained everything. The voicemail, the signatures, Malcolm's plans. Tom listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Can you come to my house tomorrow morning? Bring copies of everything. I can do that. Evelyn, his voice got serious. If what you're telling me is accurate, this is fraud. Possibly elder abuse. We're not just talking about family drama here. This is criminal. Tom's house smelled like old books and coffee, same as his law office used to. We sat in his study surrounded by legal volumes while he reviewed every paper I'd brought. Ruthie had managed to quietly photocopy the signature cards, risking her job to help me. Tom examined them with a magnifying glass, comparing them to Lila's real signature on older documents. These aren't hers, he said finally, his voice shaking with anger. Look here and here. The loops are wrong, the pressure's different. Someone forged these, or she signed under duress. My hands trembled. Hearing it confirmed made it real in a way it hadn't been before. What do we do? First, we protect your assets. Immediately. Then we document everything, build a case so airtight that Malcolm can't wiggle out of it. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and started making notes. How good are you at playing a role, Evelyn? What kind of role? The kind where you seem helpless and confused while we quietly build a wall he can't see until it's too late. I thought about that for a moment, about everything Malcolm had already taken from my daughter. Then I smiled. I can do that. The following Saturday, I called Malcolm and asked if he could help me paint the porch railings. I made my voice sound tired and grateful, like a helpless old woman who couldn't manage on her own. Oh, Malcolm, I'd be so appreciative. My arthritis is acting up something terrible. He agreed immediately, probably seeing it as another chance to play the devoted son-in-law. He showed up that afternoon in old jeans and a t-shirt, paint supplies in hand. While he worked, I brought him lemonade and chattered away like a lonely grandmother, asking questions, drawing him out. The more I acted harmless, the more comfortable he became. You know, Evelyn, he said after a while, his guard completely down. You should really think about downsizing. This house is too much for you to handle. Oh, I couldn't leave this place. It's all I have of Carl. But think practically. You could move into one of those nice senior communities. Lila and I could handle selling the property. Make sure you get a fair price. There it was. His real agenda, delivered with that perfect smile. I just nodded and smiled back, letting him think I was considering it. All the while, my phone sat in my apron pocket, recording every word. For my 88th birthday in April, Lila and Malcolm threw me a dinner at Antonio's, the Italian place in town. The dining room glowed with candlelight, and they'd invited a few friends and neighbors. Malcolm stood to give a toast, raising his wine glass high. To Evelyn, who's given us all an example of strength and longevity. May you have many more years. Everyone clapped. Lila smiled at me with such love that my heart ached. But I caught something in Malcolm's eyes when he said many more years. Something that made my skin crawl. Like he was already calculating how much longer he'd have to wait. Halfway through dinner, I pretended to feel tired. I'm sorry, everyone. I think I need to head home early. Lila immediately stood. Mama, are you okay? Just tired, sweetheart. You stay, enjoy yourself. Malcolm can drop me off. But Malcolm had already pulled out his phone. Actually, I need to make a quick call. Lila, can you take your mom? I'll catch a ride with the Johnsons. In the parking lot, waiting for Lila to bring the car around, I heard Malcolm's voice from around the corner. He was on the phone, speaking low. I'm telling you, it won't be long now. The old woman's fading fast. Pretty soon we'll move her somewhere, and the property's ours. Mr. Dell caught me outside my mailbox a few days later. He's 82, sharp as a tack, and has been my neighbor for 40 years. Evelyn, I probably shouldn't say anything, but I saw something that's been bothering me. What is it, Howard? He glanced around like he was worried about being overheard. That Malcolm fellow, your son-in-law. I saw him last Thursday at the hardware store parking lot. He was with a woman, not Lila. Young things, blonde, fancy clothes. They were sitting in his car, and it looked mighty cozy. My stomach dropped. You're sure it was him? Positive. I was going to mind my own business, but then I thought about you and Lila. Something about it didn't sit right. I thanked Howard and walked back to my house slowly, my mind racing. An affair. On top of everything else, he was cheating on my daughter. Each new discovery made me angrier, but I channeled that anger into cold determination. Malcolm thought he was so clever, playing everyone, planning his schemes. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I'd survived things that would have broken men like him. I wasn't about to let him destroy my daughter's life. I called Ruthie again that afternoon, hating that I kept putting her in difficult positions, but having no choice. Ruthie, I need one more favor. Can you check if there have been any unusual charges on Lila's accounts? Hotels, restaurants, that kind of thing. She called me back 2 hours later, her voice tight with anger. Evelyn, there are hotel charges going back 8 months. All in the next county. Always on weekdays when he says he's at business meetings. She paused. There's more. He's been transferring money from Lila's account to his personal account. Small amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there. Probably hoping she won't notice. I thanked her and hung up, then sat at my kitchen table staring at the floral wallpaper Carl and I had put up 30 years ago. This was worse than I'd thought. Malcolm wasn't just planning to take the property eventually. He was actively stealing from Lila right now, bleeding her accounts dry while having an affair, and plotting to institutionalize me. The scope of his betrayal was breathtaking. And Lila had no idea. None at all. That Sunday after church, I asked Lila to come over for lunch, just the two of us. She made her famous potato salad while I fried chicken, and for a while it felt like old times before Malcolm. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something serious. She looked up from the salad bowl. What is it, Mama? I'm worried about you and Malcolm. About your finances. Her expression closed off immediately. Not this again. Lila, please listen. Have you checked your accounts lately? Do you know where your money's actually going? Malcolm handles all that. I told you he's better at it. Her voice rose defensively. Why can't you just trust him? Why do you always have to find something wrong? Because I love you. Because I'm your mother and I can see things you can't. No, you can't stand that I'm married and happy. You want me to be alone like you. The words hit like a slap. Lila's face immediately crumpled. Mama, I didn't mean. It's all right. I kept my voice steady despite the hurt. I understand. But inside, my heart was breaking. Malcolm had poisoned her against me more than I'd realized. Malcolm must have sensed I was getting too close to the truth, because his next move was brilliant in its cruelty. He started a whisper campaign, subtle and devastating. At church, people began asking me if I was feeling all right, suggesting I seemed confused lately. Mrs. Chen mentioned that Malcolm had expressed concern about my memory. At the grocery store, the cashier spoke to me slowly and loudly, like I was a child. I realized what he was doing. He was laying groundwork, creating a narrative that I was losing my faculties. That way, when I tried to expose him, nobody would believe me. They'd think I was a confused old woman imagining things. It was masterful. Evil but masterful. Lila called me one evening. Her voice gentle but firm. Mama, Malcolm and I have been talking. Maybe it's time to consider assisted living. Somewhere you'd have help, people checking on you. I don't need assisted living. I'm perfectly fine. But you've been acting strange. Forgetting things, making accusations. We're just worried about you. I closed my eyes. He'd already convinced her. My own daughter thought I was senile. That's when I knew time was running out. I met with Tom again, this time at the bank with Ruthie present. We moved quickly, with precision I hadn't known I possessed. Tom had drawn up paperwork establishing an irrevocable trust. Every asset I owned, the farm, the house, the land, everything went into a legal structure that Malcolm couldn't touch even if he somehow got power of attorney. This protects you and protects Lila, Tom explained. Even if they tried to declare you incompetent, this trust stands. I'm the trustee, and everything's designated for Lila's benefit after you're gone. Malcolm has no access, no control, nothing. We signed everything, got it notarized, filed it with the county. It took 3 hours, and by the end my hand cramped from signing, but it was done. Malcolm's grand plan, his patient scheme to steal everything, had just hit a legal wall he didn't even know existed yet. Now what? I asked Tom. Now we set the trap, he said with a grim smile. We give Malcolm enough rope to hang himself with. The trap came in the form of a seemingly innocent document. Tom drafted something that looked like a property transfer authorization, very official, full of legal language. He sent it to Malcolm with a letter explaining that due to my declining condition, certain preliminary steps needed to be taken. Malcolm took the bait immediately. 2 days later, he showed up at my door with the papers and a sympathetic expression. Evelyn, I know this is difficult to think about, but it's for the best. This just allows Lila and me to help manage things if you need us to. The paper he showed me was actually different from what Tom had sent. Malcolm had altered it, changed key phrases to give himself sole control instead of joint control with Lila. He thought I was too confused to notice. I signed it with a shaky hand, playing my role perfectly. What Malcolm didn't know was that Ruthie had witnessed the whole thing through my kitchen window, photographing every page with a telephoto lens. And the signature I'd used wasn't quite my real one. We'd just documented fraud in progress. Tom had video cameras I didn't even know about recording from multiple angles. Malcolm walked out of my house thinking he'd won, carrying proof of his own crime. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom worked with a quiet intensity one remembered from when Carl was sick. He compiled every piece of evidence into a file that would make any prosecutor drool. The forged signatures from the bank. The altered property document. The recorded conversations where Malcolm discussed his plans. Financial records showing the systematic theft from Lila's accounts. Witness statements from Howard Dell about the other woman. Hotel receipts from the credit card records. Photographs of Malcolm's meeting with his mistress, taken by a private investigator Tom had hired. It was overwhelming, damning, and absolutely airtight. When do we move? I asked him. Soon. But I want to do this in a way that protects Lila emotionally as much as legally. She needs to see who Malcolm really is, not just hear it from us. What did you have in mind? Tom smiled. That sharp lawyer smile that had won cases for 40 years. Tell me, Evelyn, how do you feel about hosting a charity dinner? The Oak Valley Community Center hosts fundraisers throughout the year, and I've helped organize dozens of them over the decades. So when I suggested hosting a dinner to raise money for the church renovation fund, nobody questioned it. I sent invitations to everyone in town. Neighbors, church members, local business owners. Malcolm and Lila received theirs in the mail, a formal card with elegant script. I called Lila personally. Sweetheart, I know I've been having a difficult time lately. I want to make amends. Please come to the dinner. It would mean the world to me. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice softened. Of course, Mama. We'll be there. Malcolm probably didn't want to attend, but he couldn't refuse without looking bad. And besides, it was another chance for him to play the devoted son-in-law in front of the whole community. The dinner was set for Saturday night, May 15th. Tom and I spent the week making preparations that had nothing to do with charity and everything to do with justice. The community center had an excellent sound system, perfect for what we had planned. Saturday night, the community center glowed with warm light and the murmur of conversation. Long tables covered in white cloths held plates of roast chicken and spring vegetables. Nearly 200 people filled the room. Everyone from Pastor Jerome to the mayor. Malcolm and Lila sat at a table near the front. Malcolm looking handsome in a dark suit, playing his role perfectly. He'd even brought flowers for the centerpieces, even the thoughtful son-in-law. After dinner, I stood to give my speech. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I'd gone past nervous into a place of absolute calm. Thank you all for coming tonight. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. I'm blessed to be part of this community, to have friends and family who care. Before we talk about the church renovation, I want to share something with you. I nodded to Tom, who stood by the sound system controls. Sometimes we don't see the truth until it's played back for us. Sometimes we need to hear things exactly as they were said. Malcolm's face went pale. He'd finally realized something was wrong. I pressed play on my phone, connected to the speakers. His voice filled the room, crystal clear and utterly damning. That old bat doesn't know when to die. And Lila? She's too stupid to handle her own money anyway. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that packed room. Faces turned toward Malcolm, expressions shifting from confusion to shock to disgust. Lila's face had gone white as chalk, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. Once we get the house signed over, we're golden. Malcolm's recorded voice continued. The old woman's farmhouse is worth at least $400,000. I let the whole message play, every cruel word, every calculated scheme. When it ended, I spoke into the microphone. That was my son-in-law Malcolm, in a voicemail he accidentally sent me 6 weeks ago. But that's not all. Tom stepped forward, carrying a folder. The bank manager, Patricia Wilson, stood beside him, along with a representative from the county prosecutor's office I hadn't even known was there. Malcolm Hendricks has been systematically defrauding his wife and attempting to defraud her mother, Tom announced. We have documentation of forged signatures, unauthorized account access, and attempted property fraud. Two police officers I hadn't noticed before moved toward Malcolm's table. He stood up, stammering. This is insane. Evelyn is senile. She doesn't understand what she's. I understand perfectly, I said quietly. I always have. They arrested Malcolm right there in the community center, handcuffs clicking shut while 200 witnesses watched in stunned silence. The charges Tom listed made my head spin. Forgery, fraud, theft, attempted elder abuse, financial exploitation. Malcolm kept protesting, his perfect facade cracking completely as they led him away. But Lila, my poor daughter, collapsed. Just folded in on herself, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. I rushed to her side, wrapping my arms around her shaking shoulders. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. You knew, she choked out between sobs. You knew and you didn't tell me. I tried. But you wouldn't have believed me without proof. He'd poisoned you against me too well. She cried for a long time, there in front of everyone, while I held her the way I'd held her as a child after nightmares. Eventually, people began quietly leaving, giving us privacy. But they left with something to talk about, something that would spread through town faster than wildfire. By morning, everyone would know what Malcolm really was. The months that followed were hard on Lila. The investigation revealed even more than we'd known. Malcolm had another family in Cleveland, a woman he'd been with for years, 2 children he'd never mentioned. Our marriage wasn't even his first bigamy. The district attorney called him a serial con artist who targeted women for their assets, and Lila was just his latest victim. She moved back home with me while the legal proceedings crawled forward. Some days she barely got out of bed. Other days she'd cry for hours. But slowly, with time and patience, she started healing. She took back control of her finances, changed every password, closed every account he'd touched. She started seeing a therapist. She began to smile again, though sadness still lingered in her eyes. Malcolm's trial was quick. With our evidence, he had no defense. They sentenced him to 12 years for fraud and related charges. His real estate business collapsed. His reputation, built so carefully over years, dissolved in days. Everything he'd schemed for, every lie he'd told, every person he'd used, it all came to nothing. He'd destroyed himself by his own hand. Now it's September, and I'm sitting on my porch swing watching the sun set over the cornfields. The boards creak gently as I rock, the same sound they've made for 40 years. My bird feeder sways in the evening breeze, cardinals and finches taking their last meals before dark. Steam rises from my teacup, chamomile tonight, Carl's favorite. Inside the house, I can hear Lila humming while she makes dinner. She's started painting again, something she gave up when Malcolm told her it was a waste of time. Her laugh comes more easily now, genuine and free in a way it hasn't been for years. She's talking about going back to school, maybe becoming an art teacher. Mama, she calls through the screen door. Dinner's ready. Be right there, sweetheart. But I sit for another moment, watching the sky turn orange and purple, thinking about everything that's happened. People ask me if I regret exposing Malcolm so publicly, humiliating him in front of the whole town. I tell them no. Some battles can't be fought quietly. Some snakes need to be shown for what they are, in the light, where everyone can see. Patience wins wars bigger than strength ever could. Carl taught me that years ago. You don't rush into the storm. You wait, you watch, you prepare. And when the moment's right, You strike with everything you have. I finish my tea and stand up, my old bones creaking a bit but still strong enough. Strong enough to protect what matters. Strong enough to save my daughter. Strong enough to show that old women aren't helpless victims to be discarded and deceived. We're warriors who've been fighting longer than men like Malcolm have been alive. Inside, Lila has set the table for two. We sit down together like we've done 1,000 times before, mother and daughter. Whole again. And that's victory enough for me.